There's something quietly humiliating about being stood up, especially on New Year's Eve. It wasn't just the date that stung or the way I had shaved, styled, and spritzed myself like I was going to be on the cover of GQ. It was the silence. The way I checked my phone every 5 minutes, rereading the last message like it might magically refresh into something better. Can't wait to see you tonight. 8 p.m., my place. That was the last thing Mason sent me. He ghosted. No, sorry, something came up. No, I got stuck at work. Just nothing. I sat in my car for a full 15 minutes outside his apartment before I finally accepted it and drove home, fingers clenched around the steering wheel like that might hold me together. Back in my place, I threw my jacket on the couch, kicked off my shoes, and stood in my living room like I didn't recognize it. The place looked too clean, too planned. I'd lit candles, set up snacks, picked out a playlist. The TV was paused on some countdown show I never actually liked but left on for ambiance. I didn't want to be alone. So when the knock came, it startled the hell out of me. I wasn't expecting anyone. My friends had scattered to different parties, and I hadn't told any of them about the date. I guess part of me wanted the surprise of introducing someone new, like, hey, look who I brought, something easy, something normal. I opened the door and found a guy standing there holding a six-pack and looking about as unsure as I felt. Hey, he said. I know this is kind of random, but, I'm Liam. I live across the hall? I blinked. Yeah, I've seen you around, he nodded, glancing down at the beers like they might help explain him. I was supposed to go to a party with this guy I've been seeing, but he ditched last minute. Told me he wanted to start the year without any labels, whatever that means. Sounds like a coward, I said before I could stop myself. He smiled weakly. Yeah, anyway, I saw your lights on and thought, if you're not busy, maybe? I stepped aside without thinking. Come in. He walked in like someone who didn't expect the offer to be accepted. Like maybe he was already rehearsing how he'd cover up the awkward rejection. He handed me the six-pack and looked around. Wow, this looks nice. You were expecting someone? I gave a small, tired laugh. I was. Got stood up, too. Damn, he said, pulling off his jacket and flopping onto the couch like we were old friends. Maybe the universe wants us to be miserable together, or maybe it wants us to share this really bad champagne I bought, I said, heading for the kitchen. I'll take bad champagne over bad men any day. We clinked mismatched glasses a few minutes later, both of us barefoot on the couch, watching fireworks explode on TV. The sound was too loud, and neither of us was really paying attention. I noticed the way he tucked one leg under the other, how his eyes had little crinkles at the corners when he laughed. I liked that. We traded stories. The good, the bad, the ones that still left little bruises when we talked about them. He told me about his ex who cried after closeness because it felt too real. I told him about the guy who invited me to dinner and then asked if I was paying. With each sip, each laugh, the bitterness wore off a little more. At some point, Liam leaned back and said, "This isn't how I thought tonight would go." Same, I replied, but it's not terrible. He turned to look at me. No, it's not. And for the first time all night, I believed it. The fireworks on the TV were hitting their peak, blasts of red, green, and gold lighting up some skyline we didn't recognize. The anchors were shouting excitedly, counting down the minutes like it mattered. But inside my apartment, the air was quiet. Not in a bad way, just calm. Liam was sitting cross-legged on my couch now, his elbow resting on the armrest, eyes scanning the screen like he was watching, but his mind was clearly elsewhere. I could relate. My mind was pinging all over the place. This was supposed to be a night where I finally got some clarity with Mason, some confirmation that maybe he wanted something real. Instead, I was next to a guy the first barely knew, who somehow made the air feel less heavy just by being here. So, he said suddenly, breaking the silence between us. What was your guy like? I glanced over. You really want to hear about him? Liam shrugged. I'm nosy when I'm tipsy. I took a breath. He was cute, smart. Said he liked that I listened more than I talked. We went on 3 dates. I thought maybe we were building toward something. Then this. Liam nodded slowly, picking at the label on his beer. It always feels worse on nights like this, like the timing makes the rejection louder. Exactly, I said, surprised by how dead-on that was. I used to date this guy named Marcus. Liam continued, his voice casual, but I could hear something a little raw underneath. We were together for most of last year. Thought it was serious, thought we were in sync. Then he told me he wanted an open thing. And by open, he meant, I'm already sleeping with someone else, and I hope you're cool with that. Oof, I winced. That's not openness. That's cheating in a trench coat. Liam laughed. Right? I felt like an idiot. You weren't. You just trusted the wrong person. He gave me a quick glance, eyes soft. So did you. We didn't say anything for a few seconds after that. On screen, the countdown was entering its final stretch, 10 minutes to midnight. I wondered what Liam would have been doing right now if his plans hadn't fallen through. Probably dancing at someone's place, clinking drinks with people who knew him better than I did. And yet, here he was. I'm glad you knocked, I said quietly. He looked up. Yeah? I nodded. You saved me from spiraling. I was about 5 minutes away from hate texting Mason something embarrassing. Oh no, he said, grinning. Never drunk text the ghoster. That's rule number 1. I raised my glass. To rule number 1. We clinked again. I could feel the warmth in my chest, not just from the champagne. Okay, he said, shifting to face me more fully. This might sound weird, but can I ask you something? Go for it. When I knocked, were you expecting someone else? Like, did you think it might be Mason? I paused. Yeah, for half a second I did. Liam nodded like he'd figured as much. But when I saw it was you, I added, I didn't feel disappointed. That part surprised me. He smiled. Same. We both looked back at the screen. 5 minutes to midnight. A question sat on my tongue for a while before I worked up the courage to ask it. Do you think people like us, guys who don't pretend to be chill when we're not, do you think we just expect too much? Liam frowned slightly. You mean like wanting someone who actually shows up? I gave a half laugh. Yeah, he shook his head. I don't think that's too much. I think that's basic decency. I looked at him then, really looked. There was something so open about his face. Not in a fake, performative way, just honest. The kind of look people wear when they're done pretending. You deserve someone who chooses you, I said, surprising myself with the conviction in my voice. He met my eyes, and for a long second, neither of us looked away. So do you, he said softly. 3 minutes to midnight. I wasn't sure what we were doing. I didn't know if we were just two lonely people sharing a bottle and licking wounds, or if something was genuinely shifting between us. But the quiet around us didn't feel awkward. It felt full, like maybe something was beginning. Liam reached for another drink but stopped midway. Okay, last question, he said. And it's important. Shoot. Do you think this champagne is actually as bad as it tastes, or are we just emotionally fragile right now? I burst out laughing. I think both can be true. He laughed too, sinking back into the couch, his shoulder brushing mine. We didn't move apart. 2 minutes to midnight. The city was starting to erupt with sound outside, distant pops and cracks of real fireworks. I turned down the TV just a bit so we could hear both the real and the televised, like parallel universes colliding. You have someone you usually kiss at midnight? He asked. Nope, I said. Last year I kissed a red Solo cup. Romantic. You? Usually just kiss my glass, or my dog when I had one. I smiled. Sounds about right. 1 minute. We both leaned forward, eyes on the screen. Not because we cared, really, but because it felt like something to hold on to. A tradition, even if it was frayed at the edges. 30 seconds. I could feel my heartbeat tick up, not from the countdown, but from him. From sitting this close, smelling his cologne, feeling the static between us buzz in the quiet. He looked over at me. I looked back. His eyes didn't move. I swallowed. He smiled. It wasn't a big smile, just enough to make my chest tighten. My breath caught. He leaned in just slightly. So did I. Our knees touched. The room erupted with fake cheers from the TV. And then he kissed me. It wasn't a long kiss. Not one of those breathless cinematic ones where people lose themselves and knock over furniture. It was soft, simple, tentative even. The kind of kiss that asks more than it says, like a quiet question floating between us. His lips were warm, not shaking, not nervous, just careful. When he pulled back, he didn't look away right away. He just stayed there, close. His forehead nearly brushed mine. His eyes held mine like he was watching for something, a reaction, a signal. Maybe even a sign that he hadn't messed up. He hadn't. "You okay?" he asked quietly. I nodded. "Yeah." He smiled again like he was letting himself believe it. Outside, the real fireworks had reached full blast. You could hear them now over the muted TV, big cracks of color lighting up the sky. Somewhere across the city, couples were kissing, hugging, toasting. Friends were yelling into the night, strangers were probably clinking glasses on rooftops. And here we were, two guys on a couch, half lit by the flickering TV, a little buzzed, a little bruised from being rejected, but still here, still leaning into something that felt new and quiet and very, very real. Liam leaned back into the couch with a slow breath and let his head fall against the cushion. He was still close enough that I could feel the warmth of him next to me. The room had gone oddly still again, even with the noise outside. Maybe it was just my head. Maybe everything else just faded for a second. "I don't usually do that," he said, still staring at the ceiling. "Kiss strangers on couches during countdowns?" He let out a small laugh. "Yeah, pretty much." "Well," I said, "for what it's worth. I don't usually open my door to hot neighbors who show up with beer and heartbreak either." Liam turned his head toward me, raising an eyebrow. "You think I'm hot?" I rolled my eyes. "Please, you knew that already." "Just confirming," he said, smirking. We fell quiet again after that, in the way people do when they're not sure what comes next, but don't want to ruin what just happened. "So now what?" he asked softly. I looked over at him. "Now I put on some music that isn't from a countdown special, and maybe we have another drink." He smiled like that answer made sense to him. "Sounds good." I got up and walked over to the speaker, swapping out the TV for something low and mellow. The kind of playlist you play when the party's over, but you're still hoping someone stays a little longer. Liam stretched his legs out along the couch and rested his arms behind his head. "So, this is how I'm starting my new year," he said. "On a stranger's couch, buzzed, freshly ditched, and making out with someone who has surprisingly good taste in champagne and playlists." "You forgot one," I said, grabbing us each another drink and handing him one. "What's that?" "Someone who didn't bail." That got a real smile out of him. He lifted his glass. "To the ones who didn't bail," we clinked again. We talked more after that. Not the shallow stuff either. Real stuff. About family. About the weirdness of growing up gay in towns that didn't always feel like home. About how hard it is to meet people who aren't just looking to pass time or cure boredom. Liam told me about a time he fell too hard, too fast, and how it made him scared to be the first to show feelings after that. I told him how I'd built walls so high around myself after my last breakup that I wasn't sure anyone could get over them. "But tonight," he said, resting his drink on his knee, "you opened the door. You knocked." I reminded him. He smiled. At some point we drifted into silence. Not the kind that needs fixing. Just the kind that shows up when two people are comfortable enough not to fill every second with sound. It was well past 1 in the morning when he yawned. "You need to crash?" I asked. "Honestly," he said, "yeah, didn't expect to be out this long." "You can take the bed," I said immediately. "I'll take the couch." He shook his head. "No way! I already crashed your New Year's. You don't have to give up your bed, too." "It's not charity," I said. "I'm offering. Plus, I'll probably just stay out here scrolling TikTok until I pass out." He looked at me, a little unsure, then nodded slowly. "Okay, thanks." I handed him a clean towel and pointed him toward the bathroom. While he disappeared down the hall, I grabbed a spare hoodie for him from my closet, just in case he needed something warmer to sleep in. When he came back, he looked at me in that hoodie like it meant something. Maybe it did. "Good night," I said as he stepped into my room. He paused in the doorway. "Hey," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. I don't know, if you want to join me later or whatever, just to talk more, I'm not going to be weird about it." I swallowed. "Thanks," I said. "I'll think about it." He nodded once, then disappeared into the room, the door clicking softly behind him. I stood in the quiet apartment for a while after that, glass in hand, listening to the last of the distant fireworks fizzle out. And I realized something. This wasn't how I thought the night would go, but maybe that was exactly what made it feel right. I didn't sleep right away. The couch was comfortable enough, and the apartment was warm and quiet. Almost too quiet, after the noise of the countdown and Liam's voice filling the space. I lay there with my phone in my hand, screen dark, staring up at the ceiling. There was something playing in my head on repeat. Not the kiss, surprisingly. Not the champagne. Not even the sad story of how we each got ditched. It was the way he said, "If you want to join me later, I'm not going to be weird about it." It wasn't just the offer. It was the tone behind it. The calmness. The honesty. He hadn't said it with any expectation or pressure, just a door, cracked open. And now I couldn't stop thinking about it. I got up once, around 2:30 a.m. to get water. The apartment felt different now, like it had been rearranged slightly. Like someone had moved the furniture a little when I wasn't looking. The echo of Liam's laugh still lingered in the air somehow. Or maybe I just wanted it to. I walked slowly past the closed bedroom door. I thought about opening it. About slipping in beside him, just to talk. Just to be near someone who hadn't let me down that night. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I went back to the couch and finally drifted off sometime around 3 o'clock, heart still restless. I woke up to sunlight and the faint smell of coffee. For a few groggy seconds, I forgot Liam was even here. Then I heard a mug clink and my front door open slightly and close again. I sat up slowly, blanket slipping off my chest. He was in the kitchen, hoodie still on. Barefoot, hair messier than it had been last night, sticking out like he'd slept hard and not cared. He looked comfortable. "You have, like, zero coffee in your kitchen," he said as I walked over. I ran downstairs to the bodega. "You brought back peace offerings?" I asked, nodding at the paper bag on the counter. "Coffee and bagels," he said. "I'm an excellent guest." I smiled, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. "I can't believe you're awake already." "I don't sleep well in strange beds," he said with a shrug. "But yours was actually decent. Like, guest approved." He handed me a cup and leaned back against the counter. For a moment, I just stood there, sipping slowly, taking him in. The way he filled the space felt right. Like he wasn't just crashing here. Like he belonged here for a little while longer. "I almost came in last night," I said quietly. He looked at me. "Yeah? Yeah?" I stood outside your door for like a full minute. "What stopped you?" I exhaled. "I guess I didn't want to mess up whatever this is. I didn't want it to feel like something that only happened because we both got hurt." His face softened. "That's fair. But I did want to," I added. "Not just because of the kiss. Because I actually like talking to you. Being around you." Liam nodded, eyes steady on mine. "I'm glad you didn't force it, and I'm really glad you opened the door when I knocked." We ate breakfast on the couch, knees touching occasionally, neither of us in a rush to leave the comfort of the moment. The playlist from last night was still paused on my speaker, waiting like a half-written sentence. He asked if he could play something, and I said sure. He queued up a chill acoustic album I'd never heard, and soon the soft hum of guitar and vocals filled the background. "So, what happens now?" he asked after a while, not looking at me, just staring at the coffee in his hands. I thought about that. There was no playbook for this kind of thing. No step-by-step guide for what to do when the guy you met by accident turns out to be the best part of your new year. "I don't know," I said honestly, "but I want to find out." Liam smiled and set his coffee down. Then he leaned in and kissed me again. Longer this time. No countdown, no TV noise, no buzz of midnight anticipation. Just him and me, and the quiet understanding that something had shifted for real. When he pulled away, he didn't go far. "Can I stay a little longer?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. "Yeah," I said. "Stay as long as you want." Liam stayed. Not just for the morning. Not just long enough to finish his coffee or polish off the bagel. He insisted was a little too toasted but still edible. He stayed through the lazy mid-morning hours, sprawled across my couch, swapping stories with me like we'd known each other longer than 12 hours. By noon, we were both still in the clothes from the night before, and it didn't feel weird. If anything, it felt like we were playing hooky from something more exhausting. Expectations, dating apps, pretending we weren't lonely. At some point, we both shifted and stretched, and somehow we ended up sitting so close, our legs were tangled. Neither of us moved away. "So, full honesty," Liam said, staring down at his empty mug. "I almost didn't knock on your door last night." "Really?" "Yeah, I stood there for like a full minute, thinking I'd look pathetic." "You didn't." He gave a half smile. "I felt it." I bumped my knee gently against his. "You look like someone who needed company, not someone who was pathetic." He glanced at me. "And you didn't think that made you pathetic either? Letting some random neighbor crash your pity party?" "Not for a second," I said. "If anything, you made the night make sense." He looked down, shy almost, like he wasn't used to someone saying things like that without a punchline. I liked watching him get quiet like that. "So, what are you thinking?" I asked after a moment, voice lower now. "About us?" he said, looking up. "Yeah." He tilted his head, the ghost of a smile still on his lips. "That maybe this isn't just some rebound moment." "You sure?" "No," he said, honest again. "But it doesn't feel like one. Not with you." I let that sit between us for a bit. I could have filled the silence with some sarcastic quip or changed the subject. But I didn't want to. I wanted to stay there in that delicate space with him. That moment where something still forming had the chance to take shape without being rushed. "You want to go for a walk?" I asked. "Now?" "Yeah, get some fresh air. Let the new year hit our faces." He smiled. "Yeah, let me just put shoes on." We ended up walking for nearly an hour, wandering aimlessly through our neighborhood. The city was in that weird holiday hangover mode. Streets mostly quiet, a few couples out, people clutching coffee like it was keeping their souls alive. It was chilly, but not bitter. The kind of cold that wakes you up gently. We didn't talk about anything heavy. Just little things. His favorite movie, the worst date I'd ever been on, what he used to want to be when he was a kid. A zookeeper, which somehow made total sense. I told him how I used to think I'd marry the first guy who didn't make fun of me in high school. He said that's such a low bar. And I said, yeah, but when you're closeted and 15, the bar's practically buried underground. We passed a small park, and Liam pointed to the swings. "Race you," he said suddenly. "What are we, 10? You scared?" I took off before he finished the sentence. He laughed and chased after me, and it felt so stupid and joyful that I didn't even care when he beat me there by a hair. We swung side by side, boots dragging in the mulch like we were too old and too tall for it, but didn't give a damn. "I needed this," he said after a while, pushing slowly. "Same." He looked over at me again, that expression I was starting to recognize. Part curiosity, part surprise, part something that felt like the beginnings of care. "You're easy to be around," he said softly. "So are you." "I'm not usually," he admitted. "I'm not difficult. But I'm guarded, too used to waiting for people to lose interest." I stopped swinging, planted my feet, let myself look at him. "I'm not losing interest." He met my eyes. "You sure?" "I'm here, aren't I?" He smiled, but there was something steadier in it now, like he was starting to believe me. We walked home slowly, shoulders brushing occasionally, neither of us rushing the end of the day. When we got back to my building, he hesitated just inside the door. "I should probably go," he said, scratching the back of his neck. "Give you your space. I didn't mean to hijack your whole weekend." "You didn't." "Still," he trailed off, "this wasn't part of either of our plans." "Maybe that's the point," I said. He looked at me again, really looked. "Do you want me to stay?" he asked, but there was less doubt in the question this time. I stepped closer. "Yeah," I said, "I do." He didn't need more than that. We went back upstairs together. Back in my apartment, everything looked the same, but felt different. There was a shift in the air, not dramatic or loud, just steady. Like when you finally realize a storm isn't coming after all, and the quiet becomes comforting instead of tense. Liam hung up his jacket this time without being asked, like the space already made sense to him now. I tossed my keys on the counter and leaned against it, watching him as he walked slowly into the living room, hands in the front pocket of his hoodie. His socks slid a little on the floor, and I laughed when he almost tripped. "Okay," he said, pointing at the rug. "That was not a graceful entrance." "You've been here all of 12 hours," I said. "It's not an entrance anymore, it's a continuation." Liam turned to face me, his head tilted slightly. "You good with this continuing?" The question landed gently, but it carried weight. He wasn't just asking if he could sleep over again. He was asking if I was okay with this. Us, moving forward. Whatever this even was. "I'm not in a rush," I said. "But I don't want this to be a fluke either." He stepped closer. "Feels like more than a fluke." It does. I don't remember who moved first, but suddenly we were standing toe to toe. His hands settled on my hips. Mine found the edges of his hoodie. It wasn't a heated moment. It was something slower, deeper, like we were both testing the water with a foot and finding it warm. He kissed me again. It felt different than the ones before, not because it was longer or deeper, but because it was intentional. There was no countdown, no buzz of alcohol or adrenaline. It was just us choosing it, in the bright light of day. When we broke apart, neither of us moved away. "I usually hate the morning after," Liam admitted, his forehead resting lightly against mine. "Why?" "Because it always feels like you're pretending nothing happened. Or worse, realizing maybe it didn't mean as much as you thought." I nodded. "I've been there." He looked at me again. "But this doesn't feel like that." "No," I said. "It really doesn't." We ended up back on the couch again, this time closer than the night before. Legs tangled from the start. Our bodies touched in small, constant ways, shoulder to shoulder, thigh to thigh. I'd never realized how much I liked the casual intimacy of it, how grounding it could be. We turned on some random comfort movie, something we'd both seen a million times and didn't need to pay attention to. Mostly, we talked over it, or sat in that easy silence people only fall into when they're not trying too hard. At one point, Liam pulled the blanket over us both without saying anything. Just reached for it, draped it across our laps, and settled back in beside me like he'd done it 100 times before. "I still can't believe last night," he said, eyes on the TV, but clearly not watching it. "What part?" "That I almost didn't knock. That you let me in. That it turned into this." I smiled. "You're really surprised someone was happy to see you?" He shrugged. "You know how it is. We don't always let ourselves believe we're wanted." "Well," I said, nudging his leg with mine, "start believing it." A beat passed. He looked over at me again, this quiet softness in his expression that made my chest ache in the best way. "You're dangerous," he said. "What? Because I let you in?" "Because you make me want to stay." The words sat there between us, unflinching. He didn't say it like a flirtation. He said it like a truth. I didn't rush to respond. Instead, I let the moment breathe. Let it live. Because I wanted him to know that I didn't take that lightly. "You don't have to go anywhere," I said eventually. "Not today. Not tomorrow, even. We can just see where this goes." Liam nodded and leaned his head against my shoulder. We stayed like that for a long time, long enough for the movie to end and the screen to go dark. And still, neither of us moved. It wasn't love. Not yet. It was too new, too early, too fragile for a word like that. But it was something real, something hopeful, something that didn't feel like it needed fixing or decoding. It was two guys who got rejected, found each other by chance, and decided maybe they weren't as unlucky as they thought. It was something beautiful. And it wasn't over yet. That night, Liam stayed again, not in a big, dramatic way. There was no "should I" or "are you sure" this time. We brushed our teeth together like we'd done it a dozen times before, awkwardly sharing the sink, bumping elbows, laughing when he accidentally spit into the cup I used for rinsing. "Sorry," he said, cringing. "You owe me a new cup now," I joked. "Consider it an investment." "Investment in what?" He looked at me, toothbrush still in hand. "You." My face probably gave away more than I wanted it to, but he didn't tease me. He just smiled and kept brushing. That night, we shared the bed. It wasn't sexual. It wasn't tense or confusing. It was just warm, real. His body fit next to mine like it was always supposed to be there. At one point, he reached for my hand under the blanket and threaded his fingers through mine like it was the easiest thing in the world. It kinda was. I didn't know what time we fell asleep, but I remembered thinking, so this is what it feels like when it doesn't have to be complicated. The next morning, I woke up first. Liam was still asleep, his mouth slightly open, one arm flopped across the pillow, hair doing its best impersonation of a bird's nest. I couldn't stop looking at him. Not because he was model gorgeous or anything. It wasn't about that. It was the peace in his face, the softness, the vulnerability. I was so used to putting walls up, even in my head. Every date I'd ever been on, I'd mentally prepared for the exit, for the ghosting, the cooling off, the awkward slow fade. I had trained myself not to hope too much, but watching him sleep, I realized I was hoping. Not in the way that clutches at something desperately, but in the way that lets itself imagine a little more. I slipped out of bed carefully and went to the kitchen to make breakfast. Nothing fancy. Scrambled eggs, toast, coffee. I wasn't trying to impress him. I just wanted him to wake up to something good. I was halfway through buttering the toast when I heard the shuffle of his feet. "Smells amazing," he said, voice still rough from sleep. "Morning," I said, glancing back. His hoodie was halfway zipped, hair still a mess, and he had this sleepy half-smile that made my stomach do something annoying. "You didn't have to cook," he said, rubbing his eyes. "I didn't. I wanted to." He walked over and leaned against the counter next to me. Close, but not too close. Then, after a second, he rested his head lightly on my shoulder. We stood like that in silence for a while, just breathing, just being. After breakfast, we sat across from each other at the tiny kitchen table, legs touching under the surface, making each other laugh with stories about the worst food we'd ever cooked. He told me about burning a frozen pizza with the plastic still on it. I told him about the time I made boxed mac and cheese and forgot to drain the water first. We laughed hard, and it hit me, maybe for the first time in a long time. I feel good. I feel like myself. And someone is here to see it. Later, we left the apartment together. Not to do anything fancy, just groceries. A stroll around the neighborhood, a stop at the coffee shop, where I knew the barista by name. Liam paid. Called me babe casually for the first time. Smirked when I blinked at him. "Too soon?" he asked. "I'll allow it," I replied. The day passed without pressure. We didn't define anything. We didn't talk labels or plans or whether we were a thing. But we were holding hands now. We weren't avoiding eye contact. We were walking side by side and letting it be easy. That night, when we got back and put the bags down, he leaned against the doorframe and looked at me differently. Not like a guest. Like someone deciding something. "I don't want to leave," he said. "You don't have to." "I know, but I also don't want to be the guy who just moves in after 2 nights. I laughed. "You're not. You're the guy who knocked on my door and brought beer and honesty. That's a rare combo." He looked at me, quiet for a second. "Then, I'd like to keep seeing you, if you're into that." I walked over, close enough to touch, and nodded. "I am." He reached for my hand again, and I realized this wasn't just about getting over someone else. It wasn't about being ditched or stood up or proving we were still worthy of something. It was about what came after that. What came when someone showed up instead of disappearing. Liam showed up. So did I. And now, we were both here. A week later, my apartment didn't feel like just my apartment anymore. There were little signs of Liam everywhere. His flannel tossed over the back of the couch, his toothbrush in my bathroom, a half-empty bottle of that ridiculously expensive oat milk he liked sitting in the fridge next to my generic store-brand one. His presence had folded into my life so quickly, so quietly, that I didn't even realize it until I caught myself reaching for his coffee mug instead of mine. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't dramatic. It was right. He didn't move in. Not officially. He still went back to his place sometimes to grab clean clothes, water his single, struggling houseplant, and check on the mail. But he spent more nights here than not. One night, we were lying in bed, the TV still on, some documentary neither of us was following. "I told my friend Kyle about you," he said, voice low, almost hesitant. "Yeah? Yeah. I said I met someone on New Year's Eve." I smiled, shifting closer. "What'd he say?" "He asked if I was finally done with guys who only texted 2 a.m. I laughed. "That's fair." "He said it sounds different, that I sound different." "Do you feel different?" He looked at me, really looked. "Yeah. You make me feel safe." That hit me somewhere deep, because I knew exactly what he meant. "I like being with you," I said. "Not just the cuddling and the kissing, though that's a definite bonus," he smirked. "I like the way you laugh," I added. "The way you tell stories like you're not sure you're allowed to take up space, and the way you lean into me without asking." He was quiet for a beat. Then he reached out and touched my jaw, just lightly, like he needed the contact. "I was so used to trying not to need anyone," he said, "but I don't feel weak needing you." "You don't," I said. "You feel honest." We didn't call it love yet, but we were learning the rhythm of each other's lives. The way I liked to eat eggs with hot sauce. The way he always needed a blanket on the couch even if it wasn't cold. How I organized my books by vibe, not title, and how he couldn't stand sleeping without socks. We were building something. Not out of desperation or rebound, but because we had sat together on the couch that night, broken in different ways, and chose to stay. New Year's was the beginning. What came after was the story. A month later, Mason texted me, "Hey, sorry about NYE. I wasn't in a good headspace. Hope you're well." I read it once, then again. And then I deleted it, not because I was mad, not because I needed to prove anything, but because I didn't feel anything when I read it. Just a faint recognition of someone who had passed through, then moved on. Liam saw me put my phone down and raised an eyebrow. "Mason? Yeah. You good?" "More than good." He reached over and stole a piece of toast from my plate. "So," he said through a mouthful, "I was thinking maybe this weekend we cook something together that isn't microwavable." "Oh, a real domestic test," I teased. He grinned. "Exactly. Can you handle the heat?" "Only if you stay in the kitchen." He rolled his eyes and threw a napkin at me. That was how we were. Not perfect. Not lightning struck or wildly dramatic. Just two guys who got left behind by the people they thought they wanted, then found someone who actually stayed. It didn't start the way love stories usually do. But I think the best ones rarely do.